Right.
Am I loud enough?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you well. Now, as normal, with these moots, I will start by reciting the first verse of Völuspá, and then we'll have some moments of silence where we can allow extraneous and unnecessary thoughts and feelings to go, and allow our consciousness to sink down to our center somewhat, to get in the right frame of mind to derive benefit from this moot. Particularly, we can put out of our minds any annoyance with the technical issues. Then I will recite the Grieffelmal prayer, light a candle, a verse from Hávamál, and we should be ready to go. Jag spigag alla helga kingi, mer jag minni, mögo hen talar. Hel dagur, hel dagsinir, hel nottor nifter, hel maugum nittet och sinning och gevit sitt jondum siker. Hale azi, hale ausinir, hel sjaurin fornet och fort. Malok mandvit givet och amargum tvim och likeness hindum et nibble. Branda af brandy, brenons punin funikvekis af fulnamada af malni, verse af maudikuze and til dalsko af dor. Flame is quickened by flame. A man from another man may become wiser, but from conceit may remain ignorant. Truth, like the sky, is above and beyond us all. Gods of our peoples and lands, may we spend this time together in friendship with you and with each other, and use it to the common good, with profit and with pleasure. Welcome to the second moot in a month, in realization of 1/12 of our aim for the moots to be bi-monthly this year. When Richard first suggested the topic, I had some moments of hesitation before accepting it, wondering whether it was too near to the overtly political, because it's a principle I've been attempting to follow, especially in the acts of worship, the bloats, that we should not be distracted from the eternal by the temporal. There are many other places where the overtly temporal is discussed, as it should be. There are two things I feel proud of in relation to the bloats. One is that on one occasion, someone attended with a fairly forthright slogan still on his coat from a demonstration the day before, which expressed a point of view that the majority of others in attendance would have been strongly opposed to. But I don't think that anyone at any time mentioned this, and it seemed to have no effect on the fraternity of the circle we made. Moots are, of course, not acts, moots are not acts of worship. They're broader in their scope. And although we do not formally say we're leaving weapon and dispute outside, which is done at the bloat, I should like to think we're all mindful of the fact that we start each moot with the recitation of the Grieffelmal prayer from the Edda, whose last line is, "Give us healers' hands while we live." Without further words from me, I shall hand over to Richard. Please, Richard, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ted, and thanks everyone for attending. Apologies once again for the technical issue. But as said, the title of my talk is Metapolitics in the Northern Tradition. This is related to a book I've been working on for a while and still am. But I'd like to touch on some of the main points of my ideas concerning this. I think this is in part about identity in terms of who we are, we being followers of the Northern tradition in various different ways. And I'm trying to cover things like identities I feel need to be preserved, identities that perhaps need to be rejected, and identities that need to grow and flourish. So the central aim of this talk is to explore the relationship between certain metapolitical currents emanating from the European heartland and the revival of pre-Christian Germanic spirituality, which for current purposes I will be describing obviously as the Northern tradition. Others prefer terms like Odinism or Alsa or Forensaid, so forth. So my aim in part is to provide a review of the historical and contemporary interaction of these two broad and multifaceted movements, but I also point to potential future synergies whereby the two may become more closely aligned and perhaps even integrated in a holistic manner that is both spiritual and metapolitical in nature. So part one of the talk is about orientations and deals with both the need for and means of reorientating oneself in terms of one's strictly speaking self, in other words, the personal life, and also in relation to space, time, and the social sphere, the community or ethnos, respectively. The second part is entitled Enacting Metapolitical Spheres and contains 4 themes mirroring the 4 themes that I will cover in part 1, outlining strategies of engagement in a metapolitical struggle in the religious, artistic, historiographical, and communal arenas. So just to step back a minute, what is metapolitics and what is the Northern tradition? Some of you no doubt are familiar. It was Gramsci who's generally considered to be the founder of metapolitics as a term and as a means of understanding social forces and the importance of trying to understand why purely political activity tends to fail in its aims. Basically, there's many ways that we can think about metapolitics. It's perhaps the most simplest way of putting it is the war of ideas, or the struggle within the sphere of social ideas between different forces and different worldviews. Also, I think there's one way in which politics and spirituality may cross into an intermediary ground, which is metapolitics. Some of you may be familiar with Julius Evolar's idea of an occult war. That's one way in which the metapolitical also has a spiritual aspect. That's obviously a very specific idea from one author, so I don't want to limit it to that, but that's another example of the sort of war of ideas, some of which may be occult rather than just strictly overt. So now just to talk about Odin for a minute, Stephen McNallen, who is the founder of the Alsa folk assembly, discusses the various archetypes of the gods in relation to struggle and to the what he calls the warrior archetypes, and he sees in Odin a very specific mode of engagement relating him to military intelligence and special operations. And I think it's quite pertinent to extend this into Odin's role as an exemplar of metapolitical actions, as he is both a god of speech and magic, so as well as an occult and disguised deity. So basically, I think what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do here, is to not, as Stead said, it's very important that the focus and the core is of a spiritual dimension, but of course we all live in a political world. And I think just reviewing some of the metapolitical ideas and the possible integration or even discordance in some cases with the Northern tradition can provide a bridge between those two worlds of politics and spirituality. Now, obviously, purely in terms of numbers, followers of the Northern tradition are a small metapolitical voice in the wider world, where Christianity, Islam, capitalism, liberalism, etc., are much larger forces. So it can appear at first that it's a hardly ever heard voice in a world where much more powerful forces are dominant and in some ways conflict with each other, as well as with our tradition in some ways as well. These involve alliances, crossovers, and contention within themselves, even aside from our role in all of this. So I said the first part of the talk was about orientation. So first of all, I'm going to talk about disorientation and the dissolution of personal and collective identities. So I feel that disorientation is the typical condition of the questioning soul in the modern world. Many people feel they have struggled to find a true sense of place, of people, or even of person in more personal terms, individual terms. Individual atomization is a symptom of the monoculture, and this has part of its origins, at least in the Christian religion, despite its apparently modern emergence and its secular nature in most instances today. Christianity put the primary emphasis on the individual soul and God, to the detriment of family, clan, tribe, and country, nation. all of these connections that link a person with their own biological, social, and cultural community were severed in the name of God and are now being dismembered in the name of monoculture. The totalizing influence, modern civilization, or monoculture, as I've said, by its very nature and by the base impulses that drive it, necessarily destroys traditional cultures. Its impetus is globalization, and its will is totalitarian in nature. The world is not simply, as one author neatly put it, a battle between world and jihad, as whilst these two powerful movements clash in an ever more dangerous confrontation across the globe, the picture is clearly not as simple as that. Both are driven by a desire for total control. The corporate appetite is no less insatiable than the jihad, which seeks to bring its religion to all peoples by means of the sword. But there are other forces still active which radically oppose both these perspectives and allow people of the Northern tradition to experience a radical reorientation, an opportunity to center themselves in traditional cultural roots. So, orientations, the first thing, the self, active alienation, and personal palingenesis. Personal and ethnic reawakening in the age of the monoculture. In contrast to the atomized enemy of Western man, I advocate an active alienation from Western monoculture, the creation of a new personal way of life based on spiritual metapolitical principles that are fundamentally at odds with the dominant religious and mainstream hegemony. The individual ceases to be a passively alienated atom and becomes an internally generated metapolitical cell at war with the body politic of monoculture, yet still within it. One is a cell in the body politic, but can become a cell linked to the growth of a different body. They can create a new multicellular entity, an alternative body, which we designate as an organic community at odds with society at large and the inorganic social contract of the state. alienation is literally when one enters a state of being in which something is experienced as foreign. And the fact is that this Western mask, which people of the Northern tradition wear, is foreign, having its roots in Judeo-Christian ideology. So this active alienation is on the mental and emotional levels a deprogramming process, starting with obvious examples by minimizing the effects of the mass media propaganda machine, for instance, by simply watching less TV. And the model is the phoenix, the mythical symbol in which both the individual and collective sphere of both personal and cultural rebirth can occur. The second theme, space, sacred and geopolitical, the reorientation to true north. And here the concern is with orientation in space, both in terms of sacred geography and secular geopolitics. The obsolescent concept of an east-west divide is meaningless in wider terms because, for example, Japan is now part of the West. In European terms, the East-West opposition is redundant since the fall of the Iron Curtain. We must orientate ourselves 90 degrees and perceive the concrete actuality of a North-South divide. This is a seismic cultural shift, but one which must be made. Geology and physical geography describe the tectonic plates that underlie the seemingly stable surface of our Earth, and the discipline of geopolitics has its counterparts. The vast ethnic and cultural blocks of humanity that sometimes collide and otherwise interact in ways analogous to the explosive and destructive nature of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. In this, we must reorientate ourselves geopolitically by viewing from the north and not from the west. Modern European man is schizophrenic, having a double identity, being both Western and Northern. We must return to the Northern orientation, which existed before the Western man emerged. The ancient myths and symbols evoke this world of sacred geography, most notably, for example, with Hyperborea and so forth, other mythical lands. And they have their earthly counterparts in certain geopolitical visions, the idea of Euro-Siberia, the Boreal Alliance, these kind of ideas. So orientation is about establishing a position and a recognition of where we are on various levels of being, from the most literal, physical location to the most ethereal and spiritual, esoteric and ontological. The resurrection of the Northern tradition, or polar tradition, to replace the Western tradition, has its mythological parallels with the return of the king, the avatar King Arthur, who withdraws to sleep in the mountains of the north. Hyperborea, that is, the plane of the unmanifest. Arthur, the bear man, is also connected to the pole star, and there is a legend that he will return for the last battle, which of course is comparable in our tradition with the Norse Ragnarok. The source of illumination, replacing the light from the east, is the black light of the north, as referred to by Henry Corbin when he talks about Iranian Sufism. This shift from east-west to north-south is also, spatially speaking, a rejection of the horizontal secular egalitarian plane in favor of the vertical sacred hierarchical plane. The third theme concerning orientation, reorientating in time. So with this, we have to look at different notions of time, because both Christianity and its secular variant that we see in the world, the current world secular view, is that we're constantly striving towards a greater future, which is always just around the corner. This is a very different concept to the cyclical view of time that the Northern tradition teaches us about, and inevitably the consequence of over emphasizing the future and denigrating the past is quite obvious and most manifest right now, in the sense that history is absolutely fundamental to understanding our place in and our orientation in time, and it's becoming more and more denigrated, less and less taught in schools, and so forth, because the past is, however unvenerated in our age, an active force in the present, and it's constantly changing. It's not just some dead thing that's over and done with, because obviously every second something shifts from the present into the past, so the past grows, and it is not a sort of dead force. And I think we see this, a great metaphor for this for me is the whole concept of the museum, because the museum preserves the past, and at least superficially does give it some value, but it's a past that's, as it were, in formaldehyde. It's not considered a live thing in that way. It's a veneration of the, what is perceived to be dead, but is very much alive. And the fourth of the themes about reorientation relates to the cultural sphere directly, from citizens to folk and from state to community. For example, the political subject in Alexander Dugin's fourth political theory is sometimes defined as ethnos. This is a turning away from the liberal state, and at once a reorientating of oneself towards a community rather than state. But how does this northern ethnos situate itself in the wider inter-ethnic world? Well, my view on this is that it must maintain a harmonious balance at the central axis, veering neither towards what Guillaume Fay has described as ethnomasochism to the extreme left, nor to the ethnosadism or xenophobia of the extreme right. In this sense, in a positive sense, it must maintain an ethnocentric position, which is often considered by people that don't think it through as some kind of racist position. But as I say, there has to be, in my view, a balance between self-destructive culture and the racist attack on other cultures, neither of which is a coherent or proper path to follow. So I think this same balance, reducing it from that macro level to the applying the same principles to the actual spiritual community of the Northern tradition, there must also be a middle ground, in my view, although I know many people disagree, that by its very nature, I believe, that it is a folkish position, and should resist the poles of both universalism and racist Northern tradition by white supremacists. I think both of these groups overemphasize their self-importance in different ways, but perhaps we could, that may come up in Q&A if anyone's interested in going into more detail about that. But anyway, we need to explore the various social scales in which metapolitical cultural transformation may come to pass, as I say, from the macro to the political environment, and also within the community of followers of the Northern tradition. So following on from that, I'd like to sort of start the second part of the talk, which is about how these ideas can be considered in a practical way, of what actual changes that these states of mind that exist metapolitically can affect life in actuality. So for the reasons I've outlined already in the first part of the talk, the return of the Northern tradition involves an orientation upward to the heavens. And this is in contrast to the sort of horizontal bottom feeding of postmodern nonchalance. So there has to be a spiritual axis to replace that. And in that regard, we have to have that as part of our reorientation in terms of finding our own roots, because I think what happened in the European tradition, the northern tradition as we understand it is embodied in the Eddas, and it was interrupted by the arrival of Christianity in Northern Europe, and so remained at what we might call the Vedic stage, and did not develop the subsequent philosophical commentaries that exist in the Hindu tradition, for example. So we need and this is already, of course, beginning to happen much more. We need some theosophical with a small t and theological elaborations to take place in our time to elevate the northern tradition, so that we can, as it were, catch up with sister religions elsewhere, in terms of because I think there's been this sense of a spiritual inferiority that Europe has felt in the discovery of Oriental religions ever since it sought a replacement for its outworn Christian tradition. So that's why I think part of this reorientation in practical terms will require what we could call simply theology. So in the second way in which this can be enacted, in my opinion, is in the sphere of art, where the slogan I have for that, I guess, is for originality against novelty. So it's not, for me, without profound interest that the modern connotation of the word originality has come to refer to some innovation, to a new or novel creation. This is particularly instructive when applied to the sphere of art. Underlying this modern usage of the word is the notion of progress, which of course is also in itself a novelty. One could say an aberration if looked at from the wider vistas of cultural and historical consciousness, in that it belies the original meaning of original, which concerns itself with primordial states and not with innovations or novelties. So when we seek out the origins of the word origin, we gain a much different understanding, and with it an equally different orientation, an orientation that leads us back in time, not forward in the sense understood by the ideologies of progress, which by their very nature favor the present and the future over the past. The traditional understanding of originality is simply that which pertains to origins, in the sense primitive, proto, original. In the arts, this semantic chasm between modern and traditional usage is embodied in two forms of storytelling. The original literary form par excellence, namely the traditional myth, which tells us of primordial cosmic events and provides an exemplary model for human activities, and the modern literary form of storytelling, namely the novel, which is required by its readers to tell us something new, as its very name attests. An important corollary to this matter is the notion of authorship itself. Myth is either anonymous or attributed to the gods or other more than human entities. Either way, the question of individual authorship is largely irrelevant as higher matters take sway. The modern sense of the author as a little god who creates his or her own fictional microcosm gained traction in the Renaissance. The modern connotation of myth as something which is made up, not true, also reflects the modern antagonism to origins, and once more flies the tattered flag of progress, which ironically, as said, is itself a myth in the modern sense of the word. Thus, we must be mindful that originality and novelty are far from being the same thing. Whilst as traditionalists we acknowledge and deeply value the 45,000-year-old artistic heritage of our people, true art is not about slavishly imitating the past eras, the art of past eras. Like William Burroughs, we want to tear asunder the fabric of the spectacle, but we are not nihilists like him. We do not hold to his formula that nothing is true, everything is permitted. We are not postmodernists. We should be true to our gods, so no slavish reproduction of past forms through the knowledge of past crafts, techniques, and arts. We do not want to mimic the forms of the past, but maintain the original spirit in forms appropriate to 21st century life. Third theme, paleosophy and rewriting history. As the well-known phrase states, history is written by the victors. So you must write and rewrite history, overturn the shallow and hollow caricature of our past that is taught throughout the educational system and propagated through its own paradigms. History is the small print inside a worldview. We must be paleosophists, exponents of a grand vision of deep time. As Ernst Jünger said, the anarchist in his purest form is he whose memory goes back the farthest to prehistorical, even pre-mythical times, and who believes that man at that time fulfilled his true purpose. In this sense, the anarchist is the conservative who traces the health and the disease of society back to the root. And the fourth and final theme, anthropology and the neo-folk movement. To date, the term neo-folk has designated a very heterogeneous genre of music, which is challenging to define satisfactorily. But broadly speaking, it combines traditional acoustic genres of folk music with ambient and industrial electronic music. The term neo-folk has great potential, in my view, as a metapolitical articulation for a cultural movement that extends far beyond music. We should look at it as an engine of inspiration across the arts. There must be a new tradition of neo-folk tales, of neo-folk art that draws on traditional folk art, but does not deny the need to express our tortured and unavoidable interaction with post-industrial chaos and decay. And so through each and every one of the arts, this can be applied. But even more widely, we must envisage neo-folk communities, the culture of which is imbued with a cluster of metapolitical ideas, which are then expressed outward through the arts and other forms of media in resistance to and in conflict with the prevailing society and an art world largely deformed by economics and mere fashion. But because the state of the modern world, the Kali Yuga, or the age of the wolf as it is known in the Northern tradition, these new communities cannot be simple and faithful replicas of the communities of the Northern tradition of pre-Christian times, which were built on the basic building blocks of family and clan. Given the social decay of family and other traditional communal elements, many people find their own families are not able or willing to take the path to active alienation. Thus, the new communities will have some traditional elements, family ties, etc., obviously, but will also, out of necessity, be forged out of the industrial and post-industrial wasteland where family, clan, and all other traditional elements have been mangled and otherwise compromised. Through the binding of the weird, warp and weft, the movement seeks to tie its people back to each other into a social and spiritual fabric of meaning. And I'm going to end there.
Richard, yes, thanks so much for that. I think that was a richly stimulating and wise consideration of our present situation and the way forward out of it. I'm sure there will be many people wanting to ask questions. I mean, one idea that what came to me, which I hadn't properly realised, was the significance of the term the Northern tradition, which up to now I just thought of as a rather sort of bland and useful designation. But I mean, as you saw, initially I was facing north, offering the prayers as I always do in my practice, and I think those two elements you touched upon that are present in the term Northern tradition, the fact of an orientation towards the geographic north, which defines our identity in some respect, and also the sense of verticality of rejecting the kind of reduction of everything to just different levels on that are just one level of equality. I thought, yeah, that I found that very valuable. And also the fact that you were not just bemoaning the present, but you were illuminating ways out of the malaise. I thought that was very, yeah, very good. Thanks very much for that. And I didn't for one moment miss the fact that we can't see you somehow. The ideas were more important. So that was good. Thank you. Please, can we have some questions? Does any have any reactions? Mikhail, you normally always are bursting over with things to say. What was your thought? If you can unmute.
Well, maybe I'll just give a few comments. I really like the talk. There's basically everything that what I think. I agree with everything basically he said, like 90% at least or more. So, and I really like the idea of sort of, if I understood correctly, that the idea is to sort of create a pagan theology. So as a science, let's say, or as a practice. So I think that's important. I talked about that with a friend of mine a few days ago. So, and there are many good starting points. I will again say that, for example, Nietzsche is, I think, a good starting point in the sense of Greek pagan theology. Maybe we could consider him a Greek pagan theologist in some sense. So, modern.
Richard, what do you think about that? The significance of Nietzsche.
No, I think Mikhail put it very, very well. First of all, I agree that because obviously there's an extremely well-established Greek philosophical position, it's completely understandable. Nietzsche drew on that for his own backdrop and philosophical activity. It reminds me that Jung once said about Nietzsche that he didn't realize who his own God was, because I think he was referring to a dream that Nietzsche must have shared somewhere in his writings. I think Nietzsche was 15 when he had it, where there's this wild huntsman that rampages through the forest in his dream, and Jung said, yeah, that's Odin, whether Nietzsche realized it or not. So yes, of course, because the Greek philosophy is so highly developed, it sort of relates to what I was saying, that we're in the northern tradition, sort of, as it were, we're at the Vedic stage when Christianity came, but certainly Nietzsche, and I think more recently there have been some writers within the community that have the ability to understand philosophical ideas and articulate them within the northern tradition, but also I think have the awareness that for the credibility of the northern tradition as a spiritual force beyond its own community, in other words, in dialogue with people from other religions, a level of sophistication and in theology is an essential part of that.
Thanks. Before I go on to Adam, could you just mention any one in particular? You spoke about writers who seem to be articulating a theology.
Well, you had one of them on your Moot, I believe, quite recently, Russian gentleman.
Yes.
Eugenie. I think his books are extremely important in providing part of the theology that and the sophistication of ideas that we need. So I think, and I think there have been both he and others who've also seen the importance of Martin Heidegger as well as Nietzsche as a source of inspiration as well.
Yes. No, thanks so much. Adam or Karina, please go ahead.
Hello there. So I'll keep the avatar up because my background is green screening and making me ghost out. Richard, thank you. That was a very enlightening talk. Can I ask, how much do you think urban living and the expansion of urban metropolises are harming our way of getting back to our northern spirituality? I've recently moved to a rural English farming community and found myself a lot more in touch with my own spirituality and the spirituality of my forefathers, not through anything to do with kind of metaphysical of the land, but just community and community values. Has urban living spiritually damaged us?
I guess, in my opinion, the short answer to that is yes, but nevertheless, a lot of us live in it to some extent. It's very hard to get away from. But I do agree that I moved from London to an island, a small island in Canada, where I guess there was some definitely a different sense of community. I've now moved from there again, but I think there's, first of all, is the pace of life. There's the face-to-face interaction with people in a small community. There's which are valuable things, without being cliched about being closer to nature. It's not, everything's sort of magically different, but you are literally, when you look out, you might see trees instead of buildings. It's that basics. I do think the cities are, of course, in a sense, the furthest from tradition and the forces of modernity and the anti-spiritual forces are very strong in cities. But nevertheless, I believe that people can. It's not like there's no hope if you live in a city. I know that's not what you're saying, but yes, I do agree. Urban life and cosmopolitan life particularly is antithetical and antagonistic towards tradition.
I personally, I look on living in the suburbs of London as I do as a challenge, really. I think if one can engage with the internal here in a place that doesn't make that the easiest thing to do. One somehow can do it anywhere. I think it actually helps one to have a real understanding of the things that are important as opposed to the things that not. But of course, if one's living in a place, I don't know, like the Orkneys, and having to actually engage with nature to keep alive, then almost one doesn't have to do anything else. One is intrinsically involved in a process that somehow makes one wise by its nature. Or maybe if one's on a ship dealing with the ocean as well, I think these kind of things. Similarly, Father Frank, are you still here, or have you left? I don't know. I think he's gone out. That's a shame if he's gone. It would be interesting to hear his remarks. Mikhail, you have another question. Please go ahead.
I have a little bit of a concern regarding the path Richard shown. And this is one thing regarding the Abrahamic tradition. There's an important aspect of it that was taken from Zoroastrianism, which is part of the Indo-European tradition. So I think we have to also be careful to not sort of throw out the baby out with the bathwater, that when we want to sort of create an authentic, also a Northern, but also Indo-European identity, so that we don't lose that part that is inherent in Zoroastrianism. So I would be careful about that. That's just my concern, maybe.
Yeah, no, I think I alluded at one stage to the black light of Iranian Sufism as articulated by Henry Corbin, and from what I recall of his writings, I've read quite a few of them quite a long time ago. His view there is that the source of those esoteric ideas within Iranian Sufism was partly Hermetic and partly from the Zoroastrian tradition. And so, yes, I certainly Zoroaster was a reformer of the existing Iranian religion before Zoroaster, which was you know, the Vedic stage, I would say, again, being the gathas of ancient the ancient hymns of the Iranians before Zoroaster, which he reformed. But I agree with you in a lot of the philosophical and mystical ideas that you can see within Christianity or within Islam do come from what you might call pagan roots, whether they be Zoroastrian, Greek philosophy, or Hermetic traditions. So I agree and take your point that it's very important to preserve those.
Yeah, thanks. Dirk, you made a very good point in the chat. I mean, are you able to?
Yeah, there seems to be a kind of reaction against postmodernism because people seem to dislike the idea, for example, of moral or ethical or cultural relativism. You know, it's like if you get somebody, for example, given the archetypal Islam, that, you know, Islam is as, you know, as viable a system, you know, ethically and so forth as Western culture. And that is true, but it's only true because they have the power to make it so. Christianity only exists and imposes its moral view upon the world because it had the power to make it so. And we're in a phase now where, for example, Christian guilt is being used as being weaponized in the kind of the victim culture. The idea being that, you know, I'm a victim of your oppression, so you've got to give me recompense. That only works if you have a kind of Christian worldview. And we should embrace this kind of postmodern view, because ultimately it comes down to who has the power to impose the view. And we should defend our corner, as it were. So we might acknowledge that Islam is a viable system, but it's also quite relevant and quite acceptable to say, I don't like it. I prefer this one, which is mine. And you defend it. You don't have to be an enemy with a Muslim. You just have to disagree with them. That's it.
And you think that is cultural relativism? I would have said it might be the opposite, because you're saying no, or perhaps I misunderstood you, Dirk.
Also moral relativism. You know, thou shalt not kill. Why? Why is that deemed bad? I mean, for example, if you look at Judaism, all the commandments are geared towards community. It's thou shalt not commit murder, not thou shalt not kill. It's not commit adultery, not steal. Whereas Buddhism, on the other hand, the Eightfold Way, that's aimed at the individual. So we have a kind of East-West clash there. Now, which one is best? There is no best. There's just utility for the individual and for a society, I think.
Richard, would you like to comment on Dirk's point?
Yeah, it's a very interesting point, because as I understand it, that one aspect of postmodernism is as you've articulated it, that there are different views, and you know, some are incompatible. But I think in some regards, the idea is that there isn't really any truth. It's down to your power of that force to make people believe that, or have some control through that, or to thrive through that on a mundane level. But of course, most of the postmodernist perspective on, say, Islam will never be the same as the perspective of the Muslim who believes that, because they believe, like Christians do, that there's a message for the whole of humanity to follow that spiritual path. So to them, it's not just one of a few options which they see from their perspective in a postmodern perspective. So I'm just sort of making a point of that in answer to your perspectives, because the way a postmodernist sees the warring ideas or ideologies of the world is not the same as the people who hold those in most instances.
Well, yes, this is a perfect description of cultural relativism, in that one person is a postmodernist who holds it's all relative, and another is an exemplar of one that doesn't. You know, who is to say which is right? And ultimately, it comes down to power, the power to impose that vision on the world, either passively through or actively.
Dirk, do you? Oh, sorry, I've just come to you in a sec, Mikhail. Do you have any good examples of things that perhaps we should be doing that maybe we aren't doing at the moment in relation to what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I've had a lot of sort of interaction, especially in the early days on the net, with sort of folkish isotru, especially America, and inevitably, almost every single thread on a lot of groups comes down to rants about Jews and niggers. Yeah. The success of Islam, for example, is well, historically, it's because the failure of the Cold War, the failure of communism and socialism, our destruction of Arab nationalism. Islam was like the last man standing. That's the only thing that could oppose, for example, of Western imperialism and Western capitalism. So in that sense, we created it. But also, Islam is not the reason for our failure. We should address our failures, not their successes.
Yeah, absolutely.
If somebody exploits us because of our stupidity and weakness, we should address our stupidity and weakness, not their success in taking advantage of it.
So, sorry, Richard, would you like to comment at all?
No, I agree. I think there's too much emphasis on, we got to worry about our own situation and what we can do about it. And I think that was one of the things I tried to touch on with the talk, is to try and, look at who we are, our identities to preserve, identities to reject, and identities to grow, rather than, obviously, I like Dirk made the point that there are other powerful forces out there, but really overly focusing on those to the extent that we're not actually dealing with what we can do is problematic. Yeah, when we've got to create our own situation, improve it, and try and understand what we're doing and how to do it, and not be overemphasis on other points of view.
One of the things. One of the things I kind of find ironic is that people who claim there's no such thing as objective truth, that it's all culturally determined and so forth, basically they're making the Nazi argument for might makes right and the will to power being supreme, because when you're in a vacuum and nothing means anything, a fist in the face is the ultimate arbiter.
Yeah. I just wanted, on the back of what Richard and Dirk was saying, one of I think, without doubt, the most successful metapolitical movement in the world started in India in 1925, when instead of Indian nationalists complaining about the British, complaining about the Muslims coming in and sort of taking over the country, they said, the fault is ours. We were weak, and that's why this happened. And from that point on, the RSS concentrated on just developing internal strength, physical fitness, people who actually knew about their own traditions, understood their mythology, their religion. And now India is going in a totally different way to the way it was supposed to go after partition, and it was established with a sort of liberal democratic constitution. But anyway, sorry, Mikhail, you've been waiting. My apologies. Go ahead. So
I want to react to Dirk. I basically have to agree with him that that in some sense might makes right. But in this sense, we just redefine the truth. And we say that truth is the most powerful idea, something that gives us the most power. That is true. So truth, I would say truth is the most powerful force.
Yes, but on the other hand, people can say, oh, well, truth is all relative. But on the other hand, we can say, no, this is what we say to be true. And we don't care what you think about it. Basically, to fight our corner, we do not have to acknowledge that they are right, even if they are under their circumstances and within their own definitions.
Okay, Adam, sorry, did you want to comment? Adam?
Yes, if I could just follow on from that conversation about the rise of Islam. When I turn off my bloody, sorry, that's better. In my work I've done in the past with counter-radicalisation and radicalisation within the prison system, we always found that the radical who was drawn to an extremist terrorist backing type of Islam was somebody that had come from a cultural void. They haven't come from a strong religious Islamic family and studied the Quran and then very rarely become more radicalized. They come from the void of living on a council estate, being like a petty drug dealer, or in some cases from a Christian background or an atheistic Western background. There always seems that the success of extremist Islam seems to prey very much on those who don't have an idea of their heritage, rather than the Muslim who has an idea of their heritage and is quite comfortable with where their family came from and quite comfortable in their religion. They are not the type of people who are useful to the extremist.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that, in that what radical Islam does, it provides certainty, it provides a mission, it provides something in life that's worth doing. I mean, most people don't even have hobbies these days. They just watch the TV or videos. And, you know, you have to say ultimately, why do you exist? Is it just so you can go to work and buy stuff and then die? Because if that's all your life is, it's not worth living.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. And this goes on to something else, which I call our modern messianic path, which is social media. And it's ironic, isn't it, that most of us here have interacted through social media. Social media and our addiction to it is it's taking us along the new path of extremism of views, because you can sit comfortably behind your computer.
Well, I think there's two things about social media. I mean, the first is it's very polarizing, because you end up in a little echo chamber where you think your view is that of the majority, whereas it isn't. And that in turn, it also enables like-minded people to get together and reinforce each other's opinions. That can be quite powerful in the real world. But the bottom line of social media is they want to sell advertising space. So they're looking for the common denominator. I mean, you get banned or put in Facebook jail, not for having an opinion that is evil. You get put there for having an opinion that might ultimately drive away some of their more valuable customers. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so although you talk about Twitter and Facebook and all the rest being, you know, woke and lefty and all that kind of stuff, we shouldn't disguise the fact that they're massive capitalist enterprises whose bottom line is making money. You know, if we lived in Nazi world, they'd all be giving Hitler salutes, you know, whatever makes the money. Yeah. At the moment, it's a kind of woke trend, but that could reverse quite rapidly. Yeah.
Would anyone else like to pick up on any points from Richard's talk? I know I know you're brimming over with things, Mikhail. Edith, have you any thoughts that you had at all?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Oh, sorry. And I'm fascinated. It's absolutely fascinating. I just had one idea when you were talking about "thou shalt not kill" in the Abrahamic religion. Is of course, I think it really meant "thou shalt not kill people of our tribe." You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's
and that led me to think that in this age of mass everything, mass production, mass consumerism, everything's mass, isn't it? And I don't think we're exclusive enough. We get sort of, we kind of, we fall into the idea that you need, that numbers are important. But so whatever, you know, whatever floats your boat, whether it's paganism or whatever, it might be an idea to try and sort of remember that actually we need to be more exclusive and say, we just want to connect with like-minded people, or just and it could be just a small number, and it doesn't really matter.
So it could be 17 people in a
well, I mean, I think we've lost the sense that small is beautiful, which you know, is very, everybody's lost that idea that small is beautiful, and that could apply to any movement that you're in, because we always want to appeal to more and more people, get more and more votes, more and more consumers, more and more adherents, more and more followers, and perhaps it just might be an idea to just turn that upside down.
Yeah, I think that there's an old saying, something like, give me 7 good men and I'll conquer the world. And it's very difficult to get a group of people, even 10 people who are totally 100% committed to doing something, and they're not being bribed, you have to go to work, and they're not being threatened. And you know, I've tried it over the years, and it is incredibly difficult. I mean, getting likes and members on Facebook, that's easy. Getting people who are willing to do anything beyond ticking like is incredibly difficult. Yeah,
I mean, there is this issue with the As the True Britain Facebook group that's got about 200 members, and scarcely anyone really does anything at all except likes and posts. I mean, it's very strange. Richard, have you got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that you know, for whatever reason, you know, people aren't that committed to, as you say, even within the group, you have 200 members, and probably maybe 3/4 or more are basically inactive. I mean, I have to confess, I belong to all kinds of groups where my input is pretty minimal too.
Well, you spread yourself very widely, I'm sure. So I mean, no criticism against you.
But no, you know, I agree that there's no point in getting numbers for numbers' sake. If people are interested, they're interested. But of course, we can make them more interested. We can obviously be constructive in trying to spread the ideas that we believe are sensible and helpful to other people in the best way we can. And you know, probably we all spend a lot of time not doing that as effectively as we could. And so I just think we all just have to do what we can do the best way we can to you know, communicate with each other and articulate our views to the outside world. As we discussed, one aspect of which we've discussed today is having a theology and a sort of more credible persona to the outside world. Not persona is the wrong word. I mean the image of the sort of, you know, pagans drinking beer and, you know, tattoos and just the kind of superficialities that are often sort of part of the stereotype of our people following the Northern tradition has to be, you know, it's much more multi-dimensional than that. And I do think that the community over the last 40 or 50 years has done a lot to make itself more credible, and that so-called normal people, rather than just sort of social rejects, are part of the community as well. And it's articulated itself more intellectually and theologically too. So, you know, there's definitely some progress that's been made, even though I've been berating the whole idea of progress. There I go.
Yeah, no, it's not quite. Anita, do you have any thoughts? I mean, it's nice to hear from a variety of people at these events. Facebook. Now, someone has. I don't think he's able to speak here, but I think he's put a question on Facebook. I'm just going to go back and have a look, see if I can find that. Let's have a look.
I think one of the things we need is very simple statements for people, like who we are, what we believe, what we want to do. And you don't really want to get lost in a theology. Most people are not interested in theology.
That's also my advice from Belgium here. But I'm not religious, but on the other hand, it's useful to have some spiritual guidelines outside of politics and outside of fanatic religions.
Yeah, well, we do need a theology. You need an intellectual depth to your religion or movement, but that's for people who are looking for intellectual depth. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah, so I have one more remark regarding what you said, because there's an interesting distinction which I found between the Abrahamic tradition and the pagan Indo-European tradition, is the sense that in the Abrahamic tradition, ethics is defined negatively in the sense that it tells you what you should not do, like do not lie, do not kill. Whereas in paganism and Indo-European paganism, you have the opposite. You have obligations. Like, for example, in Zoroastrianism, you're supposed to tell the truth. Or in Hinduism, you have some kind of obligations. You have a dharma according to your caste. So I think that that's a very important distinction between the positive look at ethics and the negative look at the ethics.
Yeah, because in Isotru, we don't have really any significant prohibitions. I mean, there are a few things that are really bad, like breaking your word, breaking your oath, but pretty much everything else is advice.
Yeah.
Well, in Havamal, it's the advice from Odin.
There was a point made by Kane in the. I just looked up from Facebook. I mean, he was saying that in his academic life, both undergraduate and postgraduate, yeah, he found a lot of negative influence, I think, in his studies from the kind of mass media type of thinking, particularly from sort of Christian models of thought, if I understood the point correctly, which I agree with. I think, I mean, I've found this myself, that I've had quite Abrahamic ways of looking at things, which I've only, later realized, identified, really. Do you have any thoughts about that, Richard?
Yes, I certainly do. I think I wasn't brought up as a Christian. I went to church a couple of times. My father was an atheist. My mother was a nominal Methodist. So it was there, but it wasn't an important influence in my life. But like you, it's even over the last few years, I've become more aware of how much the ethos of, or the ideology of Christianity remains and affects my behavior, even though it's in a secular form. It's like Christianity without God. It does definitely permeate very deeply social ideologies. So I certainly catch myself at that, and I think that's something I try to sort of talk about today, is this sense of deep programming, because it is a very deep thing, and especially with the God part missing, it's much more heavily disguised, because you don't even realize its origin, because it's secular ideology that derives in part from those, in deep part from those religious ideas. So yes, definitely.
Well, it permeates out of society to the extent that if you're an atheist, you don't believe in God. Which God are you not believing in? People, it's like, the God delusion and stuff like that. There's an automatic assumption that God equals Yahweh.
Yeah,
and it's so ingrained that people don't even see that they're doing it.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Ryan, do you have any points at all? It would be good to hear from some other people before. Hello, Ryan, you there?
Sorry, yeah, I don't have any particular questions, to be honest, but it was a good talk. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much. Linda, do you have any? Hello, Linda.
Yeah, no questions. Really interesting though.
Oh,
it was like that last point, the idea of when we think about the God of God, it's always the Yahweh God, but how to turn that around within the world and within our community is very, very different.
Yeah, I think so. I obviously a lot of people use the word God to just refer to divinity or the gods or something. Yeah, and it's nice to try and use other words to describe it, really, because it immediately does suggest a certain type of Abrahamic conception, really, and it is very difficult.
That's ingrained, isn't it? Like we've said, we like Richard said, that our theology and philosophies didn't develop because of the conversion to Christianity so early. So that's so ingrained within the world.
It's almost certainly the case that only a very small fraction of what was in Northern Europe in our spiritual tradition has been preserved. I mean, an egregious example is clearly that of the teaching of the Druids, you know, who were generally put to death without being able to pass it on. And one has no idea the extent of that. I mean, going back to the earlier Moot, Caesar said it took sometimes as long as 20 years for a Druid to properly understand and to be able to pass on the full extent of the corpus. So it must have been really massive, and we just have nothing of that left. And I think the Edic poems have been preserved because they maybe were thought to be not as religiously explosive. Maybe they thought, these are just mythological tales about gods, and it's not, you know, that can exist happily side by side with theology. I'm sure there were things that were far higher in terms of the teaching and quite abstract. I'm sure, as you said, Richard, we've got what is like parts of the Vedas without the Upanishads or without the Gita, and yeah, to that extent, we're really, you know, constructing a new temple on a building site, as I always keep going on. But sorry, Richard, please speak. I'm talking too much.
No, I certainly agree. We've got a lot of catching up to do in that sense, because it's like we've got to jump from that Vedic stage to sort of catch up into some extent, we say, the Hindu tradition in that regards. A lot of work to do in a short time. But it also occurred to me while you were talking about that, and we were talking about Christianity just now, and earlier you also asked me who did I see as contributing to the kind of awareness of theology and its importance and so on. I also thought a book which I found very interesting was Alain de Benoit's On Being a Pagan, because actually most of the book is about Christianity, which is interesting, and it because he does go into very articulate exposition of how things that we assume are secular are derived from Christian theological and ideological roots. So I found that a very useful book in terms of being aware of the power of ideas that are seemingly secular and ultimately their source in a religion which is not our own. So I think that's a very useful book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Renata, do you have any contribution? Oh, sorry, Alan. You've oh no, you've been holding on. You good? That's okay. Sorry. Renata. Hello. Are you? I know you had some audio.
Hello.
Hello.
No, I don't have any contribution, but I enjoyed the talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Nice to have you.
I have a question instead. I've thought of one.
Good, good. Fire away.
Why do you think the European pagans converted to Christianity? What was appealing about it? Particular reference to, you know, the Saxons and Normans.
Remember, Carolus Magnus killed 4,500 of his own warrior because they were refusing to adopt Christianity.
Oh yeah, Richard, would you like to?
Well, I think one of the you know, it's obviously not the complete answer, but certainly the conversion to Christianity in the northern world was very often top down. In other words, the kings or the local chiefs would be the first to convert, and then sort of enforce or persuade their population to do so. Part of that was to do with trading, because with the spread of Christianity, there was new trade routes became more significant, and some of the old trade routes in the north were less less profitable than they used to be because of that. So a lot of it was, I guess you could call it, down to business, and you know, it made sense from a purely economic point of view for kings and chieftains to adhere, at least nominally, to the new religion in order to get the business, get trade contacts, and keep up with the change in the economic environment. I mean, there's some good. There's a good book written by I think it was Martin Carver, who's one of the excavators of Sutton Hoo, who's written well on that. So it's certainly one factor.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good case to compare it to why lots of countries join the EU, really, because it just seemed to be the way things were going, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think, on the other hand, that there's a lot to be said for the fact that there were probably some very, very pious priests who represented something maybe that people hadn't been able to find in the religion up to then. So yeah, it's hard to judge from this point in history, but there may have been reasons that they actually worked really hard, and some people did show great examples of selflessness, which is what drew people to it. But it's hard to know from this point in time, obviously.
I think Christianity had a very simple and very attractive message. You know, Jesus loves you and he's going to look after you, and all you have to do is accept him and everything will be all right. I mean, you can't get simpler than that.
I don't know whether that was the message. I don't know. Yeah, whether that. I mean, that's a sort of contemporary message, isn't it? Whether it was, yeah.
You're really looking at the message. Well, there's two messages. One for the kind of ruling class, in that, you know, if you convert to Christianity, here's all the benefits, including, you know, obedience to authority for your peasants, etc. But then you have to ask, why do the lowest people in society, in the lowest social stratas, accept it? And I'd imagine they accepted it far more readily than, or more sincerely than their ruling class did.
I think of quite open polytheistic religions are capable, because they accept different deities. They don't have any intrinsic reason not to accept another deity, but if that deity sort of demands total obedience, then it can, once it's kind of in the system, it can kind of take over it. Maybe there's an element like that. I don't know.
Oh yeah, well, it's the whole thing with, you know, memetics and the propagation of memes, in that you need several things to make a very successful meme. I mean, one of them is a promise, another is a threat. You know, you're going to heaven, but if you don't accept this message, you'll go to hell. And I think that's one of the unique selling points, as it were, of the Abrahamic religions.
Yes,
there's a punishment involved for not believing.
Inducing culpability, guiltiness by the people, that can be saved with holy water and the paradise.
Any more? Mika, I just want to see if I can get some questions from other people. Anita, I think it's the first time you've joined the Moot. Do you have any points that you'd like to raise with Richard?
No, thank you. As you said, this is the first time, so I'm just sort of listening to the views and to the discussions. But for me, I mean, I have a very clear personal definition in regards to that Christianity is a religion, but my Norse faith is more a faith and is a way of living, is a choice of living. And I don't need to have sort of like a more narrow-minded vision in who I'm engaging with. I can engage with everyone, and I can accept everyone because it doesn't infringe on my way of living or loving the world.
Richard, sorry, I don't want to. Please, yeah, please, if you'd like to respond to that.
Yeah, I think it was mentioned earlier in different ways also, is that we can spend too much time worrying about what other people are doing or believing, and not enough on what we can actually do to change things, either on a personal level or on the social level, is what's within our power, you know, and you know, if people aren't bothering us, then we don't want to necessarily spend too much time worrying about what they're doing, because that's not going to change what they're doing anyway. So I guess this comes down to change. It has to come from us.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Alan. Sorry, did you? I didn't see your hand up there. Sorry.
I put my hand up about a dozen times.
I'm sorry. I apologise.
Yeah, you're right. I'll accept it. Right. Number one, brilliant talk, and I'd like to thank Richard. I really like, and also I thought the comments from Dirk were really illuminating and thought-provoking. I'm new. I realise since I've been on this group, I've got a lot to learn, and I'm certainly learning a lot from it. So I'd like to thank everybody. But my question to Richard is a very simple one. I noticed on Stead's invitation he sent out that you have done a few programs on television, and I think I've seen some in the past without really connecting a name to it. Would any of your programs be repeated in the near future?
Well, they were all. I think the first one was broadcast in 2000, and the last one in 2006. So they're old. I think they, you know, they're the kind of thing that might show up at 3 a.m. I have seen a couple of them over here. I live in Canada. That they do broadcast them occasionally here, but I doubt they'll ever be on mainstream TV again. I think most of them you can find on YouTube. A couple of them, I think the first two series, I did 4 sets of programs. The first 2 came out on DVD at the time. I know that's an old-fashioned format these days, but you're more likely to find them on YouTube.
I'll certainly have a look at the next few days. And, if they ever are repeated, if you could try and let us know, you know, if they're repeated on, dare I say it, mainstream electronic media, please let us know. Many thanks.
Absolutely.
Really illuminating talk. Really.
Thanks, Alan. Sorry, I think your background meant I couldn't see the hand. Sorry, Kane, please. You've got your hand raised. Hello, Kane. Are you able to?
Muted.
Yeah. You're muted, Kane. Yeah. Thank you, Andre.
I would like to say a few words, if you don't mind.
I will. I just try to. I know that Kane has got to go. Actually, I want to try to get his.
Muted.
Oh, sorry. No question. Oh, okay. That. I think he just done that. Yes. Andre, please, go ahead.
So, a few words about myself. I am Flemish, from Antwerp. And in my family already 100 years ago, they refused to give Christian name to the children. And the 3 cousins of my mother were named Achille, Virgile, and Ulysse. Now, due to social pressure, I did my studies in French. And that's the reason why I joined the old French movement I speak about 40 years ago, called GRES, is a group of research of European civilization. And they speak also, as I heard previously, about metapolitic, not being involved too quickly in aggressive and nervous politic, but more struggling on the cultural field. Personally, I found my way when I rediscovered the old Hanseatic League that you can see here on the map I send you. I presume you can see it.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
The old Hanseatic League was active from 12th to 17th century, grouping people like London, Flanders, Norway, up to Novgorod in Russia. What was for me very interesting is the fact that in 1980, a group of old Hanseatic cities decided to relaunch the spirit of the Hanseatic League. And since then, each year, they have a weekend, 4 days, what they call the Hanseatic Days, where they join together in a sort of a revival of the old Hanseatic League in a frame of a friendship from Flanders to Russia. And I work since a long time on a social contract for Northern Europe, combining history and Nordic tradition.
If anyone's interested in finding out more about Andre's projects, please get in contact with me, and I can forward your emails.
Yes, please do for me.
See, if you compare here the old Hanseatic League map of the 15th century with the actual map of Europe, what is very interesting is that it is also on the anthropologic level a very similitude between the old connection of the Middle Age, the anthropology, and also the fact that you have in the middle of this area a little island called Gotland, and it's again in the middle of this light blue area. So it's at the same time, it's also an area where at the end of the week, most of the people speak about Sunday, the day of the sun. So indeed, if you want to know more about this search, I wrote a new social neoconservative social contract about North European, and I have a podcast too explaining that. So you are very welcome to contact me.
Thanks very much, Andre. Thanks. We're winding things down now. So I think that anyone who's not asked anything, Alex, do you have any points? Hello, Alex.
No, hi. Can you hear me?
Hello. Nice to.
Yeah. I thought it was really, really interesting. I agreed with everything. I thought the points made by Richard and Dirk were really, really enlightening. I like the thing about art not being novel, about originality.
Yeah, I agree.
That was interesting. And I thought the point about learning from Islam was a bit of a dagger to the heart.
Heinrich Himmler had the Quran in his night table. So I don't know what we have to learn from Islam.
Oh, sorry, not from Islam. Learning from its success.
Yes.
Not from the
The success, as always, the treason of our own elite that are pushing us, like today, the super class against their own folk.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, Islam is it's a big issue. I think, yeah, it's a big issue. I mean, it's as I think as Adam said, what it does give it really gives a powerful sense of belonging, a really strong sense of that, which a lot of people can't get in many other places, I think. Well, we got two people asking. Yeah, now is Kane, is that a real hand that's raised? Do you have a question? Kane, you'll have to unmute if you want to. Hello, Linda's got a question. Please go ahead.
Not a question. I just googled Richard's TV shows, and all four are streaming Secrets of the Stone Age. Somebody was asking about the TV shows.
Yeah.
Secrets of the Stone Age is actually is streamed on all four, so you can catch that there.
That was Alan. So, yeah.
That was good. Moya, do you have anything you'd like to say? Moya,
Moya's just messaged.
No, she just thanks. No, Kane, I presume maybe there it's a false hand raised. As like.
Yeah, he's also said he doesn't have any more questions.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No, that's good. Well, I think we'll close it there. Richard, you've been very generous with your time, and you've clearly spent a long time working on the talk you've given, and I hope it will appear somewhere else. Is that the case?
Well, yeah, I'm hoping it will become a book fairly shortly.
Great.
I don't usually like to say that I'm going to publish this, that, or the other from the occasional bitter experience, but I'm pretty confident. I'm far along with it, yeah. So I'll definitely let you know if it becomes a book, which it should do.
Wonderful. Right, I will just formally close the meeting. So if you would and blow out the candle. Amautugir miskunsame aesir at quellis gadag loefa, kono e prender, maki e roende moi e givine, ise ide kemer ol e trykket och at not skal kvöld loefa. Blessed gods of our peoples and lands, at evening shall one praise the day, and at night shall one praise the evening. We offer thanks for what we profited by and what we found pleasure in. Digger either, digger os. Cuido either. Thank you so much again, Richard, for your time, and thanks everyone for your contributions, for all the questions, for staying with us. Oh, nice to see you, Linda. Nice to see you for Unblinded. Yeah, I hope I got to everyone, and yeah, I wish everyone a happy remaining. The rest of the Sunday will be a very nice day, and I shall perhaps see you at the next Moot, or maybe the next Bloat, which is at the end of the month at noon. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks very much, Richard. And sorry we couldn't see you, but we heard you, and that's the main thing.
Yes, no, thank you. I appreciate everyone's attendance, and thanks for organising it. And I'd certainly try and get on as many other of the talks that you do that I can. You know, it's Sunday morning, so you know, if I have a late Saturday night, I may not make it sometimes, but very much enjoyed previous one I've attended. So thanks again.
Thanks again.
Okay, thanks.
Bye bye, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.